Welcome back to Blackballed. I always pick like the most hardcore instrumentals for my next guest because she's the bomb. And I'm just going to introduce her now. Her name is Caryma Sa'd. Caryma, what's going on? How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
Good. I do. I pick the fattest beats for you because I'm just
You do.
like, yeah,
I'm
they're really
grateful.
good. No problem. That's anabolic beats, by the way. I'm gonna have to start plugging these producers. I know them because I'm doing a midlife mixtape for my kids. So I'm going online, and instead of like buying beats for like $1,000 or something, I'm like, hey, I'm making a midlife mixtape for my kids. Can I just use your beat on the mixtape? They're like, yeah, no problem. But I should start promoting them because they're really good producers. But um, I, I wanted to start off with a serious question because it's been like a year, like a crazy whirlwind year for you, and it's always good to go back to sort of the beginning to sort of see if you're thankful to the right people. So I was just wondering if you miss Chris Sky.
He misses me. I was in his Telegram chat the other day. Um,
Oh,
yeah, I think he took a screenshot of an image that was on Pat King's Facebook, and took the opportunity to slam me a little bit. So there is some missing going on. It is one-sided.
yeah. Well, that's to be expected. It has been a crazy year, though. I've sort of noticed a decompression of late. If I look at your Twitter page, it's like not as active as it once was. Are you sort of in like a decompression phase? Are you kind of like just in that sort of transitional place right now? Like, what are you up to?
I've been processing a lot of what happened throughout the month of February. So that's part of it. I don't think it would be sustainable to keep up the level of posting that I was doing.
Yeah.
And, there's not as much happening, right? So there's that. I've gone back to my roots a little bit and I've been doing more wrestling Twitter, which is humbling because no one likes or engages with those posts. So,
No one cares.
I'm just trying to measure, keep myself grounded. But yeah, like I am really hoping, to see something come out of uh, what I was able to cover at the convoy. So I have a book project that I'll plug it now since
Yeah,
might as well,
please.
shameless self promotion. So it's a Kickstarter, meaning there's zero risk. If we don't reach our goal, you're going to get your money back. But if we do reach our goal, and we being myself and Professor Sankoff from Alberta, we are looking to write a book about convoy law, and sort of take a facetious approach because all of this was rooted in deep, deep misunderstandings of the Constitution, like federalism, everything really. And we want to try to debunk some of that. So it's on my page if people want to go check it out. And if you pre-order, like I say, there's no risk. If we don't meet our goal, you get your money back. And if we do meet our goal, you're going to get a rad book. So that's on the go. And, just trying to see what I can cook up with what we have footage wise.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. I'm going to give you some free creative. You should, the cover should be like if it's called Convoy Law, you should write that in crayon. Because
That's funny.
so the right people will be able to be like, oh, I get it. Yeah, I was just talking about that with Nathaniel Erskine Smith earlier today on this show about how a lot of people had a really weird idea of what it was like to live under tyranny in Canada, and and there was almost no like there was almost like there wasn't even a pause for irony when Putin started raining missiles down on Ukraine. Like, oh, there's a tyrant, but nope, Justin Trudeau is still a tyrant somehow, and I guess I'm asking like, and this is a very broad question, admittedly, but how do you think Canadians learned anything? Like, if there was a curve, would we be on the upside or the downside of that curve? Like, what's going on with us as people?
Ooh, that's loaded. I mean, it depends on what demographic you're talking about, right? And if we're focusing still on the convoy occupation people, no, they don't have a good sense of self awareness or historical perspective, and in fact, are themselves spewing what may be Russian disinformation. So very, very interesting to note how dismissive they are of Ukraine. This is happening just to take away attention from us. There isn't really a war, or Putin is going in to sort of cleanse the Ukraine of things that are, from everything from like US bioweapon factories to Nazism, like just sort of these really pieced together understandings of what's happening in a pretty pro-Russian way. So it maybe shed some insight into the disinformation pipeline and how that works. But even setting that aside, it's very self-centered, this movement. So I don't think that there's any real appreciation for what's happening just even outside kind of the personal bubble.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. The Russian disinformation thing is interesting because when it came to the United States, when Trump was in office, and all the coverage that was given to this idea that he was like a useful idiot for Russia, and the P tape, and like all of these things that they were talking about, like a lot of those things turned out not to be true or completely unprovable, and they were just things that people sort of believed. But those were the things that people launched their attacks on the Trump administration from. And to a large extent, a lot of these pundits on like MSNBC and networks like that never really answered for that. And I know that you're careful. So are we able to like learn lessons from the way that the states and the media in the States handle these Russian connections? Like, are we able to come up with some sort of concrete evidence, or is that world just too murky to come up with stuff like that? And it's just really easy to sort of blame a boogeyman.
I think that there's a very natural tendency to want to find a bad guy. And I think that we have found a bad guy in Putin. And in part, that's made possible because Putin does bad things, right? So, like, that's kind of one component of it. But I have been a little bit concerned about some of the rhetoric and some of the sort of posturing that happens, with paint being thrown on like a Russian church, or like this Russian artist being sort of booted from their position. And, it's like that. I think, those are, we should be very, very careful with human rights, civil liberties, even and especially during times of war, and sort of check ourselves, because, I've never voted for someone who ended up in power, I think. And,
That's how you know you're doing it right, Caryma.
based on that, how do we judge citizens of a country by their leaders, right? Right. So I think that the sort of the over, like it's just like a lazy tendency, or like a wanting to blame people, and it spills over into acts of discrimination, and kind of, again, lazy thinking where everything is attributed to a boogeyman. And
we've
this
seen
is not
play.
this is not a pro-Russia like stance, but it's
Yeah.
just like people need to really just slow down, because part of how disinformation spreads is you're reflexive about retweeting or sharing something, and you haven't necessarily checked the validity of the source, or you're not equipped to check the validity of the source because you don't know. And then it spreads like wildfire, and you can't put that toothpaste back in the tube. So everyone just needs to like calm
Yeah.
down.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I I mean, I've been guilty of that before. It was the uh, 2 elections ago, when Justin Trudeau. It was the blackface election, whenever that was. And Justin Trudeau, I had all these sources that were like staffers in Stephen Harper's government, all kind of like calling me or emailing me and telling me the same story. And it was the story that turned out to be something that either didn't happen or no one proved that it happened or whatever, about the possibility that Justin Trudeau and a student may have engaged in some sort of activity, and there was an NDA and all that kind of stuff. And I posted something. It wasn't like an article. It was, I think it was just a tweet that said, this is the rumor going around, but yet, as of yet, no one has any evidence. But this is what a lot of people are telling me. Make of it what you will. And then the very next day, after speaking to Steve Paikin, I called him and I was like, look, I put this up and now I feel like an idiot. I'm not gonna take it down though. I'm going to add to it and retweet it or whatever and say, I think I may have been duped. What would you do? And he goes, well, James, I wouldn't have put it up to begin with. Like, yeah, I agree.
Steve.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, thank you for the. Does this advice come with a time machine? Because that'd be awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it. But he was right. He was so right. Like, and I consider Steve Paikin to be kind of a friend. Like I've interviewed him. We've had lunch. Like he knows me and I know him. And he's kind of who I look to in a way for ethics and in that kind of posturing and journalism and everything. Sorry, I went off on a tangent there because what I really wanted to say was the whole thing about the Russian churches getting hit by paint and stuff. A lot of these incidences remind me of what happened to Muslims in the United States after 9/11.
And here.
And here, yeah. And the way that, like if Persians were being persecuted because Americans don't know the difference between, Persians and Arabs, basically, right? And now we talked about this a little bit off air. I'll say the most controversial parts if you want, but I kind of feel like we're really like, wow, I can't believe Putin is doing this because Ukrainians are white. Because if you really look at what Putin's doing and what George W. Bush did, I mean, Putin's like what, 6-7% is bad right now. And I don't think anyone wants to talk about that at all.
No, it's very uncomfortable to look at oneself in a mirror, right? And Canada participated not in Iraq but in Afghanistan, right? And like what came of that? And so undeniably that's part of it. We've heard straight from various horses' mouth that that's part of it. And just the mask slips a little bit, and it's like, yeah, this is disturbing because we're seeing people who look like us. And okay, that's, a loaded statement. And even thinking about like international students in the Ukraine and some of the difficulties that they've had either exiting or receiving sort of any kind of support, and compared to if a crisis strikes in the global south, the first people out the door are usually the expats. So we're seeing a total reversal of that, where who's at the back of the line? Oh, these foreign students, right? And that's just not the usual. And I'm not saying the usual MO is necessarily, everyone wants to get out. But like, there's pretty clear just hypocrisy, I think, in this. And maybe will be great if this was used as an opportunity to think about imperialism in all its forms and how we resist that, and why we are supportive of Ukrainians defending their homeland, which I think, sovereignty, like it's all of these very big questions, but why don't we feel the same way when the people defending their homeland don't happen to be white Christians?
Yeah, I mean, I guess there are some differences, like 9/11 happened, and so they went and attacked the country that harbored the terrorists that attacked them. This is pure colonialism, isn't it? Like they are
Well,
trying
what did
to...
Iraq really have to do with 9/11?
Oh, I was talking about Afghanistan. Sorry, did I say Iraq?
No, you didn't. But they happened simultaneously, and it was under the guise of, well, we got attacked, so we need to, respond.
Yeah, Iraq was 2 years after Afghanistan. It was 2003. And I was talking about this with other people too. Like it's also the protests that I went to. The one giant protest that I went to in Toronto. It was one of those protests. I think it was March 3rd or something, 2003. And it was the one where everyone in the world had a protest at the same time. And I went to the Toronto one, and it was 1 million people. And I've talked about this a few times about the difference between that protest, and any other protest I've ever gone to since then, including the G20 protest in 2010. Might have been 11. The 2003 Iraq protest, there were like libertarians and liberals and progressives and communists and everybody that you can think of. There were gay groups, there were atheists, and everyone got along. We were all there sort of like under this umbrella of no war in Iraq. And it was easy messaging. It was very easy to get along with people that were there. We were all there for one reason. And if you contrast that to the convoy protest, I mean, they didn't have like that no war in Iraq, that succinct message. And it kind of made me, I don't know, like almost romanticize the protests from back then, because it was, people had like a unifying force to sort of like, rally around. I don't know. I think we're so divided and subdivided in our little groups now that, and of course this convoy was really like a I hate Trudeau protest more than anything else. I didn't even know what my question is. I have this worry that we're never going to be able to get back to this sort of like place where, because I think protests like the one in the Iraq protest is something that sort of props up a democracy, and right now we are seeing protests that sort of erode it.
I mean, part of it might be the disheartening impact of those 1 million people from different walks of life not actually making a difference in terms of what subsequently happened, right? And I think that there's sort of a disillusionment that comes with that. And, I can only speak to sort of my experience, but throughout adulthood, I've never really felt that any of our political institutions have a clear sort of lever where you can hold politicians accountable. It's you get your promises, you make your vote, then whatever happens, and there's no real there's a huge disconnect. And life is getting more expensive right now, certainly. Like, there are material needs that aren't being met, and I think I always bring it back to housing, and the way that affordable housing is a pipe dream in Canada, globally. And it's all of these systems that are kind of set up, propping up people who are the haves at the expense of the have-nots. So can we ever get back to what you described? In an ideal world, I think we sort of find that common ground, and most of us who are have-nots, there is a message that we can get behind. The convoy did not have any sort of coherent messaging. Even the points that they were trying to make didn't really, weren't logical, or were just divorced from like how everything actually works. So like, but it was a populist movement, right? And maybe what I'm talking about is also like a different form of populist movement, but something that, because this is happening, because of, as I see it, sort of small, like individuals and small groups looking to, further their own profit, advancement, whatever. And it's like, to hell with everyone else. And if everyone else can unite, that seems to be the obvious solution. But yes, we are more polarized. I mean, I say more polarized. What am I comparing it to? I don't know. I have my limited life experience. But we are extremely polarized at this moment. And I don't know how we get better.
Yeah, that's kind of the question of our age. And I feel like we're kind of a tripartite state in that we have a far left, a far right, and then a bunch of us in the middle just kind of shrugging, going, I don't know what to fucking do. I don't know what we're supposed to do anymore. Most of the people that I know land in that middle somewhere, from the soft left to the soft right and everything in between. And I mean, isn't that where you want to be? Kind of like, and if you want progress to happen where less people get stepped on. Like it's difficult for me. Like as much as I thought I was like a big lefty when I was younger, the true lefties were so left that I was just like, Jesus Christ, take a bath. Like, you know what I mean? There were hippies and like, you know, and they ended up becoming squeegee kids and like they were so hardcore about what they wanted, but there was no sort of like sense about them to like, and I'm not just talking about the far left. The far right is beyond repair, I think, in a lot of ways, but there was no sense of sort of like trying to repair the nation as a whole. It's so bad now that if aliens came down and was like, hey, we're aliens and we're here. If one of those aliens said, I really like Barack Obama, then the Republicans, or sorry, if one of the aliens said, I really like Donald Trump, then you know, that would be it. Like they would choose aliens over people because they like Donald Trump. Like that's how bad it is right now. Do you remember the stats though that were there were when Trump took office? It was something like 34% of Republicans literally thought Barack Obama was the Antichrist.
Jeez. Yeah.
Like, how do you even talk? How do you begin that conversation with those people? You know?
I don't know that you, I definitely don't know. And some of my efforts are focused on spotlighting sort of that group of individuals, that sort of that people who might fall into that camp, right? In the hopes of deterring others who are not on either side of the extreme from gravitating towards that, right? Because at a certain point you see it and you're like, oh, this is off-putting. Maybe I'm going to, you know, ease back a little bit or be more critical of what this group is feeding me because this is who else it attracts. And so that's why I do things the way I do things, because I think our best shot is kind of preventing this group from gaining momentum and growing more. And, you know, is that like the most effective way? I don't know. But
Have
that's,
I
yeah, I don't know.
have I asked you before if you've seen the movie The Chicago 7?
I don't know if you've asked me. I haven't.
You haven't, okay.
I get really, I can't consume serious media, so I have not seen it.
Okay, well, it's a great movie. It's about the activists in the 60s during the Chicago riot outside of the Democratic Convention. And the reason why I bring it up is because, and I know it was, obviously it's a movie, so it's exaggerated a little bit or romanticized a little bit. But if you read up on like Abby Hoffman, if you read up on like on the Black Panthers, and you read what they actually said back then about the system and the government and what they were fighting for, you can't help but get goosebumps. But you also have this, at least I did, this nagging voice inside my head going, they were fighting for something and they were doing it in the right way. It's not like there's not things to fight for right now, but I don't feel like anyone does it in the right way. Like you were saying at the beginning of the podcast, like, do our protests mean anything anymore?
Well, okay, I don't know if it's to blame, if social media is to blame for this, but this idea of bullying people or harassing people as a form of activism, I think is extremely corrosive and doesn't leave room for like actual progress. It entrenches people in negative feelings. It might feel good at the time to sort of dunk on someone or dogpile them, but like it's never against people with institutional power. And I think that it's just a form of catharsis that's really unhealthy. And it's not specific, again, to any particular group. I see it happening in different ways, although with the caveat that on the extreme right side of things, like we have kill lists and sort of it gets a bit more dramatic, I think, and dangerous. But bullying activism is not bullying, and vice versa. And like there's just it seems to be a prevailing method. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it does. I feel like we haven't. I think we've lost the spirit of what it means to actually demonstrate. Like instead of sort of embodying this idea of the heart of the issue that you're there to fight for, I feel like a lot of people are in it for themselves. They want to just be seen as the person that's there to fight for something rather than just be there to fight for something, right? Because there was no. Yeah, maybe you're right. Like maybe the internet killed protesting. It was good to like get people aware of something, but to mobilize them with a universal intent, I don't know. I think those days might be over. And plus, I don't know how like people call themselves revolutionaries these days. Like I don't know what a revolution looks like anymore. Because like who's gonna defeat state power now? Like we're fucked. Okay, we're fucked, everybody. Thank you for joining us.
Always good to on a high note.
Yeah.
I don't know. And to your point, like, and I get criticized for this quite a bit, right? Because I am in my own footage sometimes, or like part of a story, and you're self-centered and you're just self-aggrandizing, and this isn't about a cause. This is about your own brand, and it's. I don't really know how to respond to that. But at the same time, it's probably true that, revolution will not be televised. It's like live streamed by everyone who's the star of their own show, right? So like, where then is there any kind of larger or broader meaning to it? And maybe that's what's missing. And again, like, how do we snap out of that? I don't have the answer to that. And am I guilty of it as well? Maybe.
I'm probably guilty of it as well. Although some people are a little confused because they think I named it Blackballed because I'm bald. And I'm like, guys, I don't even know how to respond to that. Like, I am not bald in the sense that I roll down places. But okay, we'll go with that for now. But I think if we're all like the affordable daycare thing, let's just take an issue. I don't think you protest for affordable daycare. And if you do, you have to be super creative so that the news media covers it, right? Like it's one of those things where, like, I think a protest would be an interesting protest to see people who would be like, okay, we want minority parliaments to actually work like coalition governments, and we want them to get things done. And we have a list, and they span the spectrum. Go get it done. Like, Israel is not like a country that I would ever emulate their political kind of activities after. But the one thing that I think that they do right, aside from the religious extremist parties, is that when they form a government, it's always a coalition government of multi parties, right? So just taking that aspect of it and putting it in Canada, we don't do that. What we see is a minority parliament led by Justin Trudeau. And we see signals from behind the scenes that show that Jagmeet Singh is trying to get a deal done, and then he'll vote with the government on this or that. And then the Conservatives will always vote against. And that's it. That's what the parliament does until the next election.
Yep.
We're not being governed really when we do that. We have spokespeople that are saying things to us, and hopefully we get something that changes our lives for the better. But yeah, I have a hard time seeing Canada as this bastion of democracy when it comes to demonstrations and protests. I don't think we know what we're doing anymore. I think we've lost the plot.
I mean, I think that, they're, the most kind of intense and inspiring protests are probably not getting the coverage that's due. And I'm thinking, out west with sort of the land defenders or resistance against pipelines, and where we have our CMP arresting journalists who are trying to cover that. And so I think that we're not actually getting like a full proper view of everything that's happening. And I think that there are meaningful protests that are being done, quote unquote, right, or correctly. But on the whole, and the entire sort of protest landscape has just been lowered over the past 2 years by the ongoing weekly mask, anti-lockdown, anti-vax, there are no more mandates, but we're still going to protest anyway. Like that's just cheapened, I think, the act of protest.
Yeah, and we'll end it in a couple minutes here, but the G20 protest that I went to, I think it was 2010, in Toronto was really eye opening for me because the state had decided that Homeland Security from the United States would come in and the FBI would come in and work together with the RCMP and with CSIS and with the Toronto Police, and it was legitimately a police state in downtown Toronto, from like Bathurst to like all the way over to Jarvis, from say College all the way to the lake. Like it was, there were steel fences erected. There were paddy wagons everywhere. There were, of course, I loved it because I got into the zone, and I had my camera, and these cops were in front of the convention center, and they're like, and I just tried to walk sort of past them. They're like, "Hey, where you going?" I'm like, "I'm just gonna go to the convention center." They're like, "You can't go there. It's no go zone. Go back that way." And I'm like, "Okay." And so then I went around and I found a door open in Union Station, and I climbed up to the roof of the convention center, and then I took a picture of the cops that told me I couldn't go to the convention center. And then I walked back around, and I'm like, "You guys want to see my pictures?" And they're like, "Sure." And I'm like, "That's you guys." They're like, "Yeah, great, move along." And I was like, this is really interesting. The fact that we're such a hardcore police state, but then you got like, Gilligan here telling me that I can't go somewhere. And then I take a picture from the place that he said I couldn't go to, and he just doesn't have any idea. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that the police state kind of impression that they tried to make was like, it was just surface. It was like smoke and mirrors almost. They wanted it to appear like something. They arrested a whole bunch of people for no reason, didn't charge any of them, like 1,000 people. State power is interesting like that because I think just like the individual protester, it's a lot about themselves and how they want to big up themselves. And I think there's like a similar parallel there because as far as the police state went, it was like for show. They wanted to show their toys so that the next protest maybe would be, less populated. Yeah. All right. It's not a question, but yeah, like it was just like,
no, that's funny. Like
these are like generational protest difference. So it's like Iraq 2003 was like unity. 2010 for G20 was like all about the state showing their dicks. And then this one was just like people thinking that they could overthrow the government because they said so, right? Like we are not heading in the right direction, I don't think.
Always a good note to.
Yeah. Okay, we're all gonna die. We're all dead.
Imagine if this was purgatory.
That means there's a hell. There's something worse than this.
Really? I suppose by implication. Yeah.
Imagine this was heaven. Yeah, that's right. We're all going to die, Caryma. We're all going to die, Caryma. Thank you for joining us. No, that was good to have you. I'm going to watch your wrestling posts, and I'm going to comment on them now that I know that that's where your mind is right now. I was going to post Triple H versus Test because God rest his soul. I don't believe in God, but whatever. I went to high school with him, and he was a pretty dope wrestler. And I think Triple H is your favorite, right?
No, Chris Jericho is my favorite. Chris Jericho. And, like, Triple H is, he's got his credit. A lot of respect for him. But I'm a Jericho fan.
You should be a wrestling color commentator. That'd be pretty good, wouldn't it?
I would love that. I gave Shane McMahon my business card once, actually.
Oh, really?
Yes, they were here for, I think, SummerSlam. I forget the event. And then I went over to the hotel that they were staying at, and then I wasn't the only one. Like, there's a bunch of lunatics like us who just creep around the lobby and hang out at the bar. And I got to shake Ric Flair's hand. And then, when Shane McMahon came in, I gave him a business card. He was really polite, actually. He put it in his wallet like it mattered. But
oh, wow. Nice.
It was very nice.
But he never called you.
No, you never.
Well, that's good. Well, listen.
The
one thing I'm not worried. The one thing I'm not worried about with you is finding something to do. I wish you all the success with your book, and we'll talk soon. I appreciate you coming.
James.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
Bye.
That That is Caryma Sa'd, and I love having her on. That was a little bit of a disjointed thing. That's my fault. It was like last minute. I was like, Caryma, you want to do the podcast? She's like, okay. And then I was like, we'll talk a lot about Russia. She's like, I don't want to talk about Russia. I was like, oh shit. No, it's good having her on though. I really respect the work that she does. Looking forward to seeing that book. And we will be back on Monday. Oh, I have a surprise guest on Monday that I'm going to announce on Sunday night. So stay tuned for that. And thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.